The air down here was cold enough to chip a tooth, and the smell was brutal. Damp earth mixed with the sharp stink of gunpowder and fear. This place, a maximum security installation carved out of the foothills near Fort Bragg, North Carolina, was not just a military base. It was a deep, dark secret the government would deny existed if you asked. This heavily fortified corner of the training center for the U.S. Army Special Operations Forces was home to the elite, the best, and the ones you never heard about. Every morning at 0500 hours, the shouts of men wearing the black berets of Special Forces would echo through the concrete and steel, guttural roars that quickly melted back into the fog and the oppressive silence of this iron fortress. But this morning, a different kind of tension hung in the air, because today, a wrench got thrown into the works. A single anomaly had set foot inside this perfectly ordered, steel-clad sanctuary. That anomaly was Taylor Hayes. Just commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army, she still had the kind of fresh face you'd expect on a college campus, not a classified base. But behind those big, clear eyes was an absolute, cold steel resolve, a silent promise never to back down from any challenge. The moment the brand-new soles of her combat boots hit the asphalt that ran through the unit's compound, it was like someone had paused the whole base for a second, just like in a movie. You could cut the tension with a rusty knife. For the Special Operations Group, a unit that, since its creation, had only ever deployed teams of hardened, tough-as-nails guys, assigning a female officer to a line company was completely unprecedented territory. Request permission to report, sir. Standing in front of the company commander's office, Lieutenant Hayes felt a sheet of cold sweat tracing a path down her spine. She pushed out the loudest, steadiest voice she could manage. Lieutenant Taylor Hayes reports for duty, per assignment to 3rd Company, Special Operations Group, effective today. The heavy steel door swung open, and the battalion commander stepped out. Major Frank Stone's stare was a laser, sweeping over her from the crown of her head to the tip of her toes, like he was trying to x-ray her soul. "You the Hayes kid?" he barked. "Yes, Major." Major Stone, a guy built like a brick outhouse with a neck thicker than most men's thighs, reeked of the kind of primal intensity you only earn by being the last man standing in a dozen hellholes. His thick shoulders, the deeply tanned, leathery brown of his skin, it all screamed about the sheer brutality of the places he'd survived. He tapped Taylor's personnel file on his desk with a thick, calloused finger. "You understand what this place is before you volunteered, Lieutenant? This ain't some finishing school for pampered little misses. This is where even the average, tough son of a gun wakes up screaming from nightmares every night, desperate to run and never look back. Are you ready for that?" "Yes, Major. Absolutely. I assure you, I will not fail any part of the training, no matter the difficulty." Taylor's reply was smooth and unwavering. A barely perceptible twitch pulled at the corner of Stone's mouth, but his eyes remained stone-cold. He got up, walked to the window, and stared out at the sprawling, muddy training area. "Prove it, then. Not with words. With sweat and with your body. Until you can do that, all I see is a high-maintenance soldier who needs special consideration. Got it?" "Yes, Major." The moment Taylor stepped into the company barracks, she was hit with a focused blast of eyes, a mix of plain curiosity and outright, unconcealed hostility. The epicenter of this hostile attention was a woman sitting like a queen with her arms crossed, Sergeant Major Roxanne Voss. Sergeant Major Voss, a sergeant major who had somehow survived 5 grueling years in special operations, was a rare bird indeed. Her eyes were long and sharp, her jawline severe. Due to the amount of time spent training in underground facilities, her skin was sickly pale, and the permanent shadow in her expression spoke volumes about how much she'd had to give up and endure to survive in this hell. "Well, look what the cat dragged in. You must be Lieutenant Hayes. The rumor was true. What did you do? Take a detour through a day spa on the way to the Special Ops compound." Roxanne's voice was sharp and cold, like breaking glass. 2 other women sitting next to her let out a round of cheap laughter, checking Taylor out from head to toe like she was a piece of meat. "Seriously, Sergeant Major? You think that little thing is going to be able to hike through the Appalachian Mountains with the rest of us?" One of them snickered. "Hey, knock it off. What if you make her cry? She might go run and tell her older brother." The other one mocked. Amidst the swirling storm of ridicule, Taylor didn't flinch. She kept her face expressionless and started quietly unloading her gear. She knew that talking back right now was pointless. It would just give them exactly what they wanted. She silently gritted her teeth, the taste of blood spreading in her mouth, promising herself that she would return this humiliation tenfold with nothing but her own results and performance. But Taylor's silence only seemed to fuel Roxanne's twisted ego. She slowly got up and glided over to Taylor's back with a silent, snake-like grace. She pressed her lips to Taylor's ear and whispered a toxic breath into her ear. "Listen up, Boot. Remember this. In this place, a woman is either a weapon or just meat. It's one or the other. Which one are you going to be?" The whisper was an invisible knife twisting in Taylor's gut. It wasn't just a threat. It was a brutal declaration of war, the cold start of the merciless and unfair fate that awaited her inside this steel cage. Sergeant Major Voss's venomous words stuck in Taylor's mind like a frozen thread, refusing to disappear. The atmosphere in the barracks was always taut, like walking on a floor covered in shards of invisible glass. Taylor shut down, focusing only on the next task, using her concentration as a suit of armor. Watching her from a short distance, with an unreadable, complicated expression, was a man, Captain Liam Hayes. Captain Hayes, a first lieutenant, possessed a physique covered in lean, powerful muscle, and his eyes held a gaze that was both strict and incredibly professional. Known as one of the best officers in the unit, his reputation was built on his cool, clear judgment, which had brought countless impossible missions to successful completion. However, the look he gave Taylor was much deeper than a commander watching a subordinate. It was a complex mix of deep pain and an affection he couldn't hide. He was Taylor Hayes's one and only older brother. I can certainly take the next part of the story and rewrite it, sticking to the established character voice and plot points, while making sure to change the plot details, setting, and figures. Here is the continuation of the story, translated into the style of a straightforward American guy. The reason Captain Liam Hayes and I kept our family link a ghost story was simple. It was a vow we'd sworn that felt heavier than death itself. A promise to stand on our own 2 feet inside this monster of a military organization. They're never going to call me the Major's little brother. I can still see Liam, standing tall right before he left for the United States Military Academy at West Point, declaring, "I'm going to climb to a position where no one can challenge me, just as First Lieutenant Liam Hayes, nothing more." That fierce pride wasn't just his, it became mine too. Having the label Captain Hayes's kid sister would instantly cheapen everything I was here to build. It would paint over my accomplishments like cheap spray paint. That's why, from the day I decided to follow him into this life, I locked our relationship away in the deepest vault of my heart. This was our last piece of shared military honor. A few nights after I reported, the training hit a new level of brutal. It was a 50-mile forced march through the rough, hilly terrain of the Fort Bragg woods with a 60-pound rucksack. Even the toughest guys were collapsing, but I kept my mouth shut, swallowing saliva that tasted like copper, and finished the damn thing without falling one single step behind. I dragged my body, heavy as wet cement, back to my bunk and pretty much just fell onto the mattress. My muscles were screaming, and every joint felt like it was grating bone on bone. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the constant psychological warfare Sergeant Major Voss and her crew were running. They'd deliberately cut in front of me to break my stride, or they'd shout things loud enough for everyone to hear, like, "This is what happens when you let skirts in. It screws up the whole tempo." I just stared straight ahead, emptying my mind and focusing only on the sound of my own boots hitting the dirt. A little after the 2,200 hours lights out, I got a knock. "Lieutenant Hayes. Captain Hayes wants to see you in the Tactical Operations Center." Now, my stomach twisted. The TOC? At this hour? What the hell could it be? I smoothed down my rumpled uniform, trying to look squared away, and headed out. I knocked on the door and was told to enter. Liam was sitting there, buried in piles of field reports, his face set in a hard, strained expression. "Sit," he ordered. I sat. He just stared at my face for a long time, and I could tell it wasn't the look of a detached commanding officer. It was the look of a worried older brother. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and heavy. "You holding up? Keeping pace with the training?" "No problems, Captain," I answered, reflexively using his rank and the formal tone. That wall I put up made a deep frown crease his brow. Cut the crap. We're alone in this room, Taylor. His words were a small crack in the dam I had built around my heart. The exhaustion and the crushing loneliness hit me like a flash flood. I clamped my lips shut, refusing to show a single ounce of weakness. I'm fine, Liam. Don't worry about me. Don't worry? How the hell am I not supposed to worry? I know exactly what you put on the line to be here. But listen up, Taylor. This is a battlefield. The real enemy isn't always the guy shooting at you from the front. Sometimes it's the guy who smiles and tries to slit your throat from behind. His words were a clear shot at Voss. He knew everything. He knew how isolated I was and who was targeting me. Don't be stupid, but you have to survive. If you fail here, you'll just be pushed out of the army as a liability, just another weak girl. If that happens, your dream and everything we promised each other is worthless. His voice sounded cold, pushing me away, but underneath the surface, I could hear the pain of a brother being torn up inside and the desperate, urgent prayer for me to get back up. If I failed here, it wasn't just my defeat. It was a loss for every woman trying to stand up against the people who want to slap a pathetic label on anyone attempting this kind of challenge. I read the silent agreement in his eyes. Treating me as just another soldier, treating me strictly, was the only and biggest act of love he could show me in this steel-plated hell. I get it. I'm not going to lose. I swear I will never disgrace the reputation you've earned. I stood up and snapped him a deep salute. It wasn't the gesture of a subordinate to an officer. It was a hard, silent pledge from one warrior to another, both carrying the same badge of honor. I left the office, and the cold night wind hit my flushed face. I looked up at the sky. The moon was hidden, and there were no stars. It was a deep, black void, like a hint of my own future. But in my heart, a single, unshakable light was burning. The lonely fight had just begun. I swore silently into the darkness. No matter what's waiting, there is no going back. That vow between the Hayes siblings became the last line of defense for my sanity. But ironically, that very oath would be the trigger that plunged me into a deeper nightmare, something neither of us knew at the time. The whole mess started with something tiny, yet completely inevitable. A few days later, we had a night infiltration exercise. It was a black night, the moon completely hidden. We were supposed to use nothing but a map and compass to breach a simulated enemy perimeter and reach a target location. It required extreme focus and stamina. Despite the exhaustion from the day, I was moving through the darkness with a scary concentration. Muddy ground, tangled roots on steep slopes, deep gullies that messed with your sense of direction. I moved past it all, keeping an eye out for enemy role players. I was clearing checkpoints fast. But then, just a few hundred yards from the finish line, it happened. I went to jump across a stream, and my foot slipped on a slick, wet rock. My balance was gone. A shocking, grinding pain shot up from my right ankle. I choked on a gasp, and everything went white. It was a severe sprain. I gritted my teeth, desperately choking back any sound of pain. I knew exactly what Voss and her girls would say if I quit right now. That's why you can't trust a woman. I would rather die than hear those words. I grabbed a broken branch to use as a makeshift crutch and began to hobble the rest of the way, driven by pure, stubborn fury. Cold sweat poured down my forehead, and I fought to keep from blacking out. I walked every single step. When I finished the exercise, my ankle was swollen up like a grapefruit. The next morning, I was flat on my bunk, the pain so bad I couldn't even move. If I went to the infirmary, they'd bench me for sure, maybe a few weeks of rest. That would mean missing training and handing Voss the perfect ammunition to humiliate me. I had no choice but to lay there and wait for the swelling to go down. Late that morning, Captain Hayes came through on his section rounds. He was checking up on the soldiers, inspecting gear and making sure everyone was accounted for. As he passed my door, a tiny gap showed me lying on the bed, my face twisted in pain. Liam's heart slammed in his chest. For a second, he tried to put his officer face back on, but the sight of my chalk-white face and the ballooned-up ankle shattered his resolve. He carefully checked that no one was around, crept into my room, and closed the door almost silently. "Taylor, what happened to your foot?" he hissed, the official mask gone, replaced by the terrified urgency of an older brother. "Just a little accident during the night op. I'm fine. It's nothing big," I muttered. "Nothing big? Why didn't you report it immediately?" Liam scolded me in a harsh whisper, but his eyes showed deep concern, not anger. He quickly dug into his pocket and pulled out a small container of medication, pushing it into my hand. This is a high-grade pain patch we use in some of our deep cover operations. It's way better than anything the base infirmary has. The swelling should drop fast. He expertly ripped open the package and, with hands that were clumsy but full of tenderness, applied the cool, medicated pad to my hot, swollen ankle. Thank you. The unexpected kindness from my brother made the tightly wound thread in my heart snap. Tears rushed to my eyes. I quickly looked away, trying to hide the sudden flood of emotion. Listen to me, he said. Next time something like this happens, you report it. Immediately. Show any kind of weakness here, and the jackals will tear you to pieces. You have to watch your own back. Despite the blunt words, his voice was warm with brotherly love. Yes, Captain, I answered, raising my head and putting the soldier's mask back on. You bet. That small interaction was the spark that ignited a dumpster fire. Here is the rewritten section, complete with the new names, Americanized setting, and altered numbers. That short exchange between us. It was nothing more than a few rushed words, but it was enough to make a solid connection only we could feel. But that moment was being watched. From the blind spot in the hallway, a single person was staring with eyes full of pure, poisonous resentment. Sergeant Major Roxanne Voss. She had just happened to see Captain Hayes go into my room, and, driven by curiosity, she followed him. But the scene that went through the filter of her twisted brain wasn't a commanding officer checking on an injured subordinate. She saw a man in a locked room, secretly handing something to a young female private, intimately touching her body, and the girl ducking her face away. Through Roxanne's sick, warped lens, it was nothing less than a dirty rendezvous between a man and a woman. That little tramp is using her body to worm her way up the captain's chain. A hideous, jealous snarl twisted Roxanne's lips. This place, this sacred, hardened space that she had built her life upon, sacrificing everything feminine, every tear, was being threatened. A rookie chick was using being a woman as a weapon to easily ruin everything Roxanne stood for. To her, this was an unforgivable insult, a complete desecration of her pride. For Roxanne, I wasn't just a mouthy rookie anymore. I had become a disease, a virus that could ruin the unit's discipline, and a cunning enemy who was threatening her own status. A black fire of jealousy roared up inside her, and that fire was about to ruthlessly burn my entire future to the ground. She slipped away, and the shadow trailing her was the dark echo of a devil plotting a nasty revenge. The poison of jealousy that infected Sergeant Major Voss quickly took over, driving her actions from spiteful to psychotic. From that day on, her behavior toward Lieutenant Hayes went way beyond simple harassment. It became a relentless, calculated campaign designed to destroy my character and self-respect. Lieutenant Hayes, from now on, you're my shadow, Roxanne announced in front of the entire platoon. Unless I'm in the head, you won't be more than 5 feet away from me. You got that? It was a total declaration of war, a promise to control my life 24 hours a day. I had no right to argue. I could only answer, yes, Sergeant Major. That's when my hell started. Roxanne's abuse was never visible. She was smart enough to know that a punch or a kick would get her into trouble fast. Instead, her methods were subtle, vicious, and completely calculated, slowly tightening a noose around my soul. In the mess hall, the moment I finally sat down to eat, Roxanne would deliberately sit next to me and take her time, eating slowly. But the second I tried to rush my own meal, she would yell that I was eating too fast and would slam her tray onto the floor. The splattered food and the stench of cold soup, mixed with the chilling silence of the other soldiers, multiplied my humiliation. During room inspections, Roxanne would declare my perfectly squared-away locker disorganized for no good reason, dumping every single thing I owned into the corridor. My freshly ironed uniforms and neatly folded underwear, stuff I'd spent all night prepping, were scattered and stomped on. I had to bite my lip until I tasted blood, desperately holding back tears while I silently gathered everything up. Her 2 loyal cronies, Private Kelly and Private Johnson, only made the torture worse. They would secretly dip my towel in a toilet and hang it back up, or pour a sticky liquid into my combat boots. These were childish pranks on the surface, but they were acts of pure malice, eating away at my spirit. I just took it, telling my brother, Captain Hayes, would only make things worse. If he stepped in, the rumors of a special relationship would gain traction, endangering his own career. And worse, if the truth that I was his sister got out, I'd just be seen as a weak little thing hiding behind my brother's rank, worthy only of pity or more contempt. My pride would never allow that. I will get my revenge. I swear. Every night in my bed, I squeezed my fists until my knuckles hurt. This humiliation, this fury, these tears, I would turn it all into fuel. I'd shut them up forever with pure, overwhelming skill. The dream of that day was the only thing keeping me from losing my mind. But my silence only fanned the flames of Roxanne's madness. She couldn't stand the sight of my strong eyes, those eyes that never showed emotion, no matter how ridiculously she treated me. Whenever she looked into them, she felt a burning anxiety, like I was seeing the ugly mess inside her own soul. I want to break her. A cold, dark impulse rose up in Roxanne's heart. She wanted to twist those proud, defiant eyes with terror and despair, to crush me until I would never even consider disobeying her again. Finally, Roxanne started drawing up a plan that crossed the line. The scene would be the rugged, overgrown mountain training area behind the base, a place the soldiers rarely went. Out there, anything that happened could be easily dismissed as a training accident. She began preparing to permanently bury the uninvited guest, Lieutenant Taylor Hayes, in the darkness. The night before the plan was set to happen, in the dead quiet of the barracks after lights out, Roxanne crept up to my bunk and whispered in a voice cold as ice. Hayes, get your gear ready for tomorrow's mountain assault course. I'm personally going to test just how excellent a soldier you really are. Her voice held a thick, viscous malice, completely different from her usual snark. And you'd better remember this. Weird things happen in the mountains, don't you think? The words slithered into my ear like a cold, wet snake in the darkness. My eyes flew open, and I froze. Every hair on my body stood on end, and my heart slammed in my chest as an absolute, nameless terror gripped me. This wasn't just a threat. It was a clear declaration of murderous intent. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that the clock on my own fate had just started ticking. The deep, black forest outside my window, nestled in the Rocky Mountains, looked like a giant mouth, wide open and ready to swallow my uncertain future. The night was still dark as the Rocky Mountain peaks were obscured by shadow. At 0400 hours, a jarring emergency assembly siren ripped through the Fort Bragg training area. In the inky blackness, the only sounds were the harsh breathing of the soldiers and the crunch of combat boots on the ground. Today's exercise was the Mountain Obstacle and Descent course, a brutal, infamous section of the Special Operations Group training known for high dropout rates. The unit was headed to a treacherous, jagged peak nicknamed the Raptor's Nest because of its sheer, unforgiving rock faces. I felt the weight of my 60-pound pack on my shoulders, my lips pressed into a hard line. Roxanne's words from the night before echoed in my mind like a freezing curse. Weird things happen in the mountains. A black fog of fear tried to choke my heart, but I fought it off, yanking the straps of my pack tighter. To give in to fear here meant giving up completely. Well, look who's awake. Sleep well, princess? Didn't have any scary dreams, did you? Roxanne purred, suddenly right behind me. Her voice was sweet and cloying, loaded with a sticky malice like a hidden stinger. Kelly and Johnson, standing beside her, snickered and deliberately nudged my pack. You got a pillow stuffed in there, Lieutenant? You look totally green. It's okay, Taylor. We'll be right behind you to give you a nice little push. Maybe off a cliff. I ignored everything. I just fixed my gaze on the dark expanse ahead with the sharp focus of a predator. Just before the start, Captain Hayes stood in front of the formation. Today's training is important. It tests individual skill, but also team coordination. No failures are allowed. And focus on safety. This mountain is both our training ground and an enemy that wants to kill you. Proceed with caution. His harsh gaze flickered over me for just a second, a tiny tremor of brotherly worry mixed with command. But it vanished instantly, replaced by the cold face of an officer. That single moment, ironically, gave me another burst of strength. Watch me, Liam. I won't break for these psychos. The training was hell from the start. We were scrambling up narrow, steep paths that seemed to actively reject human presence. My lungs were on fire, and my feet felt like lead weights. Even the toughest guys were groaning. I clung to the back of the soldier ahead of me, pulling my exhausted body forward. But Roxanne's interference was relentless. On narrow paths, she would deliberately kick small stones at my feet. When passing me, she would ram her shoulder hard into mine, throwing me off balance. I slammed face first into the mud several times, picking up raw scrapes on my arms and knees. Keep up, Hayes. This isn't a parade. Don't think you get special treatment because you're a woman. You're a disgrace to this unit. Roxanne bellowed, loud enough for everyone to hear. The other soldiers either looked away or sent me cold looks of agreement. In this closed-off world, weakness was a capital crime. The training reached its most dangerous section, the Devil's Spine. It was a narrow ridge, less than 3 feet wide, with sheer hundreds of foot drops on both sides, like walking on the teeth of a giant saw. Soldiers had to rely on a single, fixed lifeline rope anchored to the rock face. When it was my turn, Roxanne exchanged a knowing look with Kelly and Johnson. I took a deep breath, gripping the rope with my gloves. Below me, the misty, bottomless canyon looked like a gate to the underworld. Step by step, I moved carefully. I was halfway across the ridge. "Snake!" Kelly shrieked from behind me. In that split second, every soldier's attention snapped toward the sound. Roxanne didn't miss her window. She slammed the heel of her combat boot with her full weight into the iron piton that held the lifeline rope. Thwack! A dull sound echoed off the rock. The firmly set piton loosened slightly from the impact. The taut rope whipped violently. Unable to fight the sudden jerk, my body lost its balance. My hand screamed as the rope ripped through my gloves. Act! My foot finally slipped off the edge of the ridge. My body was instantly flung into the air by gravity, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. The shocked eyes of the soldiers, Captain Hayes's despairing scream, and my own eyes, filled with the awful knowledge of my fate. The wind roared in my ears. The color of the sky burned into my vision as I fell toward the abyss. Then, the fall stopped abruptly with a massive jolt to my back. My pack had caught on a small pine branch that was miraculously growing from the side of the cliff. Half conscious, I desperately clung to the branch, dangling hundreds of feet in the air, with nothing but bottomless blackness below. Using my last bit of strength, I looked up at the cliff edge. The devil was standing there. Sergeant Major Roxanne Voss's silhouette was stark against the light. She looked down at my dangling body, cold and silent. There was no trace of guilt on her face, only the twisted satisfaction of someone who had completed a horrible task. I saw her lips move slowly. I couldn't hear the sound, but I could read the shape of the word perfectly. Goodbye, princess. With that word, my vision was painted over in absolute blackness. Taylor. Captain Liam Hayes's scream wasn't just a sound. It was the raw, soul-shattering cry of a man in agony. The sight of his sister's body disappearing over the cliff edge froze his mind, his time, and the world around him. But a miracle was about to happen. The instant Captain Liam Hayes confirmed my body was caught by that skinny pine tree on the cliff face, the frozen clock in his head started ticking with terrifying speed. Everyone hold. Stay right there. Prevent a secondary accident. He snapped back into the cold calm of a commanding officer, silencing the panicking soldiers with a single shout. But his voice was still faintly shaking. Knowing there wasn't a second to lose, he started wrapping a rescue rope around his own waist. His movements were mechanically precise, drilled into him from years of training, but behind his eyes, an uncontrolled storm of pure fury was raging. Captain, it's too dangerous. Wait for the rescue team. Shut up. I'm going. Shrugging off his subordinates' desperate cries, Liam didn't hesitate. He launched himself over the edge of the cliff. Using his expert rappelling skills, he shot down the sheer rock face with impossible speed, as if running on the vertical wall itself. Seeing his little sister's limp body dangling below was like a knife twisting in his gut. Taylor, hold on. Your big brother's coming for you. The officer mask was gone, replaced by the desperate sound of a brother. Reaching me, Liam quickly secured my body tightly to his own, then signaled to the crew above. The remaining soldiers pulled the ropes with everything they had, slowly dragging our bodies back up to the ridge. The moment we were back on solid ground, Liam collapsed to his knees, checking my condition. I had no obvious wounds, but I was ice-cold and shivering uncontrollably from extreme shock and terror. Seeing my completely defenseless face, a magma-hot rage boiled up from the depths of Liam's soul. Then, he noticed something totally wrong. He looked at the fixed rope I had been holding. The piton it was secured to was unexplainably loose. And right next to it, a fresh boot print was clearly impressed into the damp rock. This wasn't an accident. This was murder, planned and executed. All the pieces of the puzzle slammed together in Liam's brain, forming one monstrous picture. He rose slowly, like an animal stalking its prey. His eyes, burning with fire, locked onto one figure. Sergeant Major Voss. While the other soldiers were letting out gasps of relief, Roxanne stood frozen, watching the whole scene with a cold, blank expression. Sergeant Major Voss. Liam's voice was frigid, like absolute zero. The menace in his tone made the surrounding soldiers suck in their breath. What the hell is going on here? Roxanne met his gaze without flinching and snapped back. I assume Lieutenant Hayes slipped and fell, sir. An unfortunate accident due to her lack of skill. Lack of skill? Liam scoffed, pointing at the loose piton. He roared, "Look at this. That piton was deliberately loosened. You did this. You tried to kill Lieutenant Hayes. Do you have any proof, Captain? Or are you maybe showing special favoritism toward a certain new lieutenant? Everyone saw the way you two look at each other. What exactly is your relationship?" Roxanne's counterattack was venomous and cunning. Her words instantly set fire to the deep-seated prejudice and gossip among the troops. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. They were too familiar. They must be sleeping together. The vulgar whispers stabbed at Liam's ears. He bit his jaw so hard it cracked. If he revealed that I was his sister now, what would happen? He'd be branded a commander who was abusing his authority to label a subordinate an attempted killer just to protect his family. That would brand me a weakling whose life was only spared by her brother's rank, and I'd never be able to stand on my own 2 feet. It would be an act of destroying the soldier's honor we both cherished more than life itself. Liam fought to control the blazing inferno of his rage with the chains of reason. He put his officer's mask back on and declared, "The training is suspended. Everyone head back to the base immediately. This incident will be reported to a formal board of inquiry. Until then, Sergeant Major Voss is relieved of all duties and placed under immediate house arrest." A cold, knowing smile touched Roxanne's lips. She knew that without concrete proof, this massive military machine wouldn't be able to punish her. This incident, in fact, was the perfect opportunity to destroy Captain Hayes and me for an inappropriate relationship. On the walk back to base, I didn't say a word. I just silently endured the crushing gaze of pity, doubt, and contempt from the surrounding soldiers. The psychological pain of losing my comrades' respect hurt far more than the physical pain of falling off the cliff. That night, I lay awake in the infirmary, staring at the ceiling. I knew the board of inquiry would be meeting, but I understood the army wouldn't choose the truth of one new soldier. They would choose the unit's reputation and discipline. Roxanne's cruel smile was burned into my mind. This is a battlefield. My brother's words echoed. Yes, it is. And I was losing this battle, helpless against the pressure of the organization and the ugly malice of another human being. Just as I predicted, the cliff incident concluded in the worst way possible. The Board of Inquiry ruled it an accident caused by Second Lieutenant Hayes's poor skills and inattention, citing a lack of decisive evidence. Sergeant Major Voss was back on duty after only a few days of administrative leave. Her victory was total. The atmosphere in the unit was even more toxic than before. I wasn't just a poor rookie anymore. I had a new label, the scheming hussy, who had an inappropriate relationship with her captain and then tried to frame a senior sergeant. Liam was consumed by a deep despair, a commanding officer who couldn't protect his own sister. He desperately tried to convince me to request a transfer, arguing I couldn't stay in such a dangerous place. But I refused point blank. If I run now, I really will be a loser. My eyes held the fierce, pure light of someone who had crawled back from the edge of despair. I'm staying here. I'm going to fight. But that resolve only pushed Roxanne's madness past the final breaking point. She was frantic that she hadn't managed to get rid of me. My strong eyes, unbroken even after she'd tried to throw me off a cliff, were a constant, infuriating insult to her pride. Her mind was entirely focused on one thing: how to crush Taylor Hayes. Then, the inevitable day arrived. It was a weekend, and the unit was assigned a massive fortification project. Brutal, heavy labor to renovate some old trenches on the edge of the base. Roxanne, seizing the opportunity, immediately put me, herself, and her henchwomen, Kelly and Johnson, in the same work detail. She deliberately chose the third and used trench, a deep, overgrown, old bunker hidden deep in the woods, far from the command staff's patrol route. It was the perfect blind spot where no one would see or hear anything. A sense of dread crawled through me, but I couldn't disobey the order. I grabbed a shovel and a pickaxe and followed Roxanne into the dark woods. The air was thick with the smell of wet decay. The unused bunker, when we reached it, was about 6 feet deep, with crumbling walls and overgrown weeds. "All right, here's your job, Hayes. You start digging in the deepest, most collapsed part of the trench," Roxanne ordered, scanning the area to confirm we were completely alone. She twisted her lips into a satisfied, evil smile. "Don't think you can leave here until you're done, even if it's dark." I wordlessly climbed down and started digging in the narrow space, barely wide enough for a grown man. Just then, Roxanne's voice, cold as ice, echoed from above. "Kelly, Johnson, block the entrance." "Sergeant Major, are you serious?" Even Kelly and Johnson looked terrified, finally realizing this wasn't a joke. "Are you deaf? I said bury the entrance so that bitch never climbs out." Roxanne's eyes were blazing with true, uncontrollable madness. Pushed by her terrifying intensity, the two women, faces contorted with fear, started shoveling dirt down onto the entrance. The earth rushed in. I instantly understood what was happening and lunged for the exit, but it was too late. The collapsing dirt sealed off my escape, and I was plunged into total darkness. "Sergeant Major Voss, what are you doing? Open this!" I screamed, my desperate pleas met only by Roxanne's hysterical, cackling laughter. "That's right, you thieving whore. Stay there and realize how useless you are. This wasn't a place for little club girls like you." "Sergeant Major, please stop. She'll actually die?" Johnson cried, but Roxanne smacked her across the face. "Shut up. You're with her. If one little rat quietly disappears out here, the captain will have to give up, won't he?" Roxanne grabbed a shovel herself and started frantically throwing dirt into the trench. The soil covered my ankles, then my knees, and finally my waist. The pressure made it hard to breathe, and I couldn't move. The stench of dirt, the suffocating weight, the absolute, lightless dark. A massive terror threatened to swallow my consciousness whole. "I'm going to die. Here. Like this." Hot tears streamed down my face. The regret was agonizing. I hadn't endured all that brutal training for this ending. I wanted to be a soldier and protect my country. I wanted my brother to be proud of me. All those dreams were about to end in this cold earth. Then, at that exact moment, the forest was ripped apart by a roar that sounded like it came from the depths of hell. "What in God's name are you devils doing?" It was Captain Liam Hayes. He had stayed behind to work on paperwork over the weekend. But when he glanced at the work schedule and saw I was paired with Roxanne, and they had gone to the most dangerous, isolated corner of the base, a stone of dread had lodged in his chest. A terrible premonition drove him to the location. What he saw was pure hell, his only sister being buried alive. Liam's rationality shattered. He charged into the scene, bellowing like a wild beast, shoving Roxanne aside. He began tearing at the dirt with his bare hands, frantically digging. His fingernails were tearing off, blood gushing from his fingertips, but he felt no pain. Taylor, stay with me." When my face finally emerged from the dirt, I was unconscious, completely limp. Liam pulled my muddy body free and hugged me tightly, screaming at the sky. "No, Taylor, don't you dare die. Your big brother is here. Open your eyes. Please." His scream froze everyone present. Kelly and Johnson fell to their knees, sobbing. Roxanne stumbled backward, her face as white as a ghost. "My sister." Liam slowly turned toward Roxanne, his eyes no longer human. They were blazing with a primal, destructive rage and a murderous intent, focused entirely on the woman who had tried to murder the only person he cared about. "What have you done?" The words ripped from his throat like thunder. In that horrific instant, A forbidden truth that no one in the Special Operations Group knew was revealed in the worst way possible. The iron-willed commander, always respected by his subordinates, and the sassy new lieutenant everyone gossiped about, were siblings by blood. The white ceiling of the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center looked cold and sterile to me, like the underside of a tombstone. When I finally woke up, the first thing I felt was a crushing pressure on my chest and the phantom scent of that wet earth clinging to my nostrils. Huh. Unknowingly, I gasped for breath, scrambling off the bed. The sunlight streaming through the window felt like the blade of a shovel coming to exhume a grave, and I trembled with instinctive fear. Taylor. Liam, who had stayed by my side all night without sleeping, grabbed my shoulder. The moment he touched me, I screamed like a trapped animal and frantically shoved his hand away. Don't come near me. Don't touch me. The dirt is coming in. My eyes were unfocused, my pupils dilated in extreme terror. I had completely lost the line between reality and the nightmare of being buried alive. The weight of the earth, the suffocating darkness, and Roxanne's maniacal laugh were ringing in my ears as auditory hallucinations. This was more than just a physical injury. An awful, permanent brand had been seared onto the deepest part of my soul. The diagnosis: acute stress disorder, ASD, and claustrophobia. It was a wound too cruel for a young woman who had once been full of hope to serve her country. Liam bit his lip until it bled. Watching his sister, broken and terrified, was a pain worse than having his own heart ripped out. Rage and hatred pulsed violently in his head, threatening to burst a blood vessel. The incident was immediately handed over to Army Criminal Investigation Command, CID. The Special Operations Group was in complete chaos. The idea that a senior officer had attempted to bury a subordinate alive, a completely insane and unprecedented scandal within the most elite unit of the U.S. Army Special Operations Forces, was a catastrophic bomb. If the public found out, it wouldn't just mean the unit's dissolution. It would shake the entire military's credibility to its core. As soon as the Army's Criminal Investigation Command, CD, started their probe, Sergeant Major Voss launched a brilliant, high-level defense, calculating and completely lacking remorse. There was absolutely no intent to kill. It was just a stupid, ill-advised prank to teach a subordinate whose discipline was completely out of control a small lesson. I had no idea she was so emotionally fragile. She cleverly framed the entire incident as a prank and overzealous mentorship, painting me as the emotionally unstable problem soldier. Her accomplices, Kelly and Johnson, cracked under the pressure from the CID and the subtle threats from Voss, sticking to the story that they thought it was just a harmless joke. Overnight, the narrative was flipped. I was the emotionally unstable soldier who had wildly overreacted to a severe dressing down. And then, a much larger power moved to bury the truth. General Marcus Blackwood, the commander of the Special Operations Group and a man obsessively protective of the unit's reputation, intervened directly. He summoned Captain Liam Hayes to his office. In the room, filled with a crushing silence, General Blackwood nervously tapped the toe of his gleaming combat boot against the expensive carpet. "Captain Hayes, you're an officer, a commander in Special Operations. You understand the implications of this incident, don't you? Are you really going to smear the reputation of this entire unit because of a little personal dispute?" "Personal dispute?" "General," Liam roared, his voice laced with pure fury. "This was a clear case of attempted murder. My sister is in the hospital, struggling to breathe." Blackwood didn't blink. "Lower your voice. It's because she is your sister that this is a problem. The fact that you are the victim's family destroys all objectivity in your claims. The public doesn't care about the truth, Captain. They only see an older brother protecting his sister and tearing the unit apart." The general then laid out a proposition that Liam couldn't refuse. "Sergeant Major Voss will face the disciplinary board, but the charge will be excessive force in mentorship, not attempted murder. She will receive a minor penalty, maybe a 30-day suspension, and the case will be closed. As for Lieutenant Hayes, she will be transferred to a stateside administrative unit for failure to adapt to unit culture. This is the most logical and rational solution for everyone involved." Is this the Army's version of justice?" Liam's voice shook with utter despair. "Justice? Captain Hayes, this isn't a civilian advocacy group. This is the military, the backbone of this nation. Sometimes, a small sacrifice must be made for the greater good. The honor of this unit, built by thousands of soldiers' sweat, outweighs the frustration of your one sister. Blackwood's words were cold blades that stabbed at Liam's heart, ripping apart the honor and conviction he had believed in. Faced with the unstoppable logic of the colossal military machine, he could only feel his own crippling helplessness. That night, Liam couldn't bring himself to tell me the horrible truth. But I had already figured out my fate from his exhausted face and the pitying glances of the officers who came to visit. No one is going to stand up for me. In this organization, I would forever live branded as a victim or a problem child. No, something hard cracked and burst inside my head. I will not let them walk all over me and throw me out like trash. The fear and despair that had controlled me were slowly being replaced by a different light. The cold fire of rage and the hard strength of a steel-forged determination. In that hospital bed, I started picking up the pieces of my shattered soul, melting them down, and forging them into something entirely new, something terrifyingly strong. A few days later, I defied my brother's frantic pleas and checked myself out of the hospital. I did the unthinkable. I demanded to be returned to the unit. I am not running. I will not leave this place on my own 2 feet. I am a soldier in the Special Operations Group. My voice now carried a terrifying resolve that silenced any argument. Liam saw the awful, burning resolve in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a sister who needed protection. It was the look of a lone predator determined to tear the throat out of its prey. He couldn't say another word. When I returned, the silence was chilling and the avoidance was clear. I was a ghost walking the barracks. But I didn't look down anymore. I straightened my back like steel and met every single condemning look head-on. Late that night, after everyone was asleep, I snuck into the dusty, old basement gym. In that room, smelling of oil and old sweat, I started pounding a heavy bag with cold, focused fury. Bam, bam, bam. The dull thuds cut through the silence. My tears and screams were long gone. All that was left in my fists was pure, unadulterated rage and a black hatred for everything that had brought me to this point. A shadow detached itself from the gloom. Now that's what I call a look. A voice rasped, like rusted iron grinding together. The man was a legend in special operations, a figure both revered and absolutely despised. Sergeant Major Ghost, known to the soldiers as the drill sergeant from hell. He was the literal embodiment of the moniker Hell Sergeant. He had been sidelined from frontline duty years ago for putting his troops through inhumane training, and now he commanded a disciplinary unit for the unit's screw-ups and dropouts. He had been silently watching me. "Do you want revenge?" Ghost asked, cutting right to the chase without sympathy. I stopped punching, sweat dripping from my chin onto the floor. "Yes. You want to half-kill Voss, spit in the faces of the people who laughed at you? That's what some cheap punk does, kid." Ghost slowly walked up to me, his hand like granite resting on my shoulder. The force was enough to make my bones ache. "Let me tell you the surest, most brutal revenge you can get in this world, in the military." Ghost's eyes flashed in the darkness. Skill. Overwhelming, unparalleled skill that breaks them and wipes their very existence off the map. You become a terror that makes them tremble just by hearing your name. Run faster, shoot straighter, survive smarter than anyone else. Climb so high that they can't even touch you if they stand on their heads. Make the people who treated you like dirt take your orders. That is real revenge. His words weren't just advice. They were the devil's whisper, pouring high-octane fuel onto the fire of my rage. The soft feelings, pity, victimhood, even grief, evaporated instantly. A single, molten goal burned in my chest. I looked straight into Ghost's eyes. There was no hesitation left. "Sergeant Major, will you train me?" Ghost finally showed his teeth and grinned, a savage, almost reliable smile like that of the king of hell. "If you're ready for hell, kid, iron only gets harder the more you pound it." That night, in the darkest, most forgotten corner of the Special Operations Base, a brutal story of one girl's rebirth quietly began. She chose to sell her humanity to the devil to gain the power to destroy everything. "Listen up," Ghost told me in a low, emotionless voice. "From now on, kill your feelings. All of them. Pain, fear, pity, regret. Joy and sadness are just noise to you. You are a tool, designed only to eliminate the enemy and the obstacles in front of you. Perfectly. At his words, the last glimmer of human light faded from my eyes. What remained was the cold, cold color of honed steel. A girl died. A monster was born. A season passed since I made that devil's bargain. I was mostly forgotten. I rarely showed up outside of the closed-off training with Ghost's disciplinary unit. Everyone whispered that I had lost my mind and was irreparable. But underneath the surface, a shocking transformation had taken place. I went through Ghost's inhuman, soul-crushing training without a single complaint, performing with mechanical perfection, pushing my body and mind beyond the limit of what a human can endure, drinking muddy water, sacrificing sleep, feeling pain as a dull sensation. My physique and spirit were honed to a razor's edge. The stage for my revenge was suddenly set. The unit announced the annual Special Skills Competition, a tournament where selected teams from each company would compete in combined combat skills for the honor of being the unit's best. While every company picked their top elites, Ghost, with a childish defiance, entered a team made up of his disciplinary unit, my team. When my name was at the top of the roster, the whole unit laughed. Is Ghost insane? Is he setting up the screw-ups to be humiliated? The favorite to win was Bravo Team, led by Sergeant Major Roxanne Voss. She had used the incident to solidify her status as a capable leader who wasn't afraid to use tough mentorship, and she commanded the unit's best soldiers. For her, this competition was the perfect stage to finally bury my past and cement her own authority forever. On the day of the competition, the tension in the training field was suffocating. My Delta team looked completely out of place, a collection of shadowy misfits. But I, standing at the center, was unrecognizable. My face was a blank mask, stripped of all emotion. Yet, a palpable killing intent radiated from me, sharp enough to cut anything it touched, like a sword half drawn from its sheath. The first event was a combined obstacle and shooting course. At the signal, teams bolted forward. Voss's Bravo team immediately took a huge lead, but my Delta team started slow, deliberately lingering at the back. Loud jeers erupted from the crowd. Look at that. No heart. Only Ghost watched with a grim, knowing smile. The first obstacle was a 30-foot vertical wall. As other teams struggled with ropes, I sprinted at the wall and, with superhuman agility, grabbed small ledges, climbing like a flexible ghost, completely ignoring gravity. I was faster than anyone using a rope. Next was an area where we crawled under barbed wire through thick mud. While others grimaced and struggled, I plunged into the mud without a second of hesitation, moving like a fish in water, crossing the area at incredible speed. Then came the shooting point, the most technical part, requiring precise aim at moving targets while breathing heavily. Exhausted soldiers missed shot after shot. Even Voss missed a few. I was the last to arrive, covered in mud. I stopped and stood perfectly still, as if I weren't even breathing. I raised the rifle. My eyes were no longer human. They were the cold, focused sensors of a precision machine locking onto the target. Bang, 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 bang. 5 rhythmic shots. All 5 moving targets were struck perfectly through the center. The spectators' shouts turned to a confused, gasping silence. Voss stared at me, her face showing pure disbelief. What kind of monster is that? The final event was a close quarters battle, CQB, a direct confrontation where my Delta team had to subdue Voss's Bravo team barricaded in a derelict building. It was, effectively, a final showdown between me and Voss. At the start, I acted alone, without signaling my team. I moved like a shadow, hugging the side of the building, quickly scaling a drain pipe, and slipping through a second-floor window. Voss had stationed her troops at strategic points, waiting for us at the main entrance. But all they heard was silence. That silence was suddenly broken by the brief, choked screams of her subordinates from the rear. I moved from shadow to shadow like a ghost, silently neutralizing Voss's soldiers one by one. I used my training knife to tap vital points, and they were tagged out without making a sound. Voss, panicking, leveled a training shotgun in the last room. The door opened slowly, but no one was there. She fired at the door, recognizing the trap too late. In that instant, the ceiling ventilation duct opened. I dropped out of the duct, silent as a spider, right behind Voss. By the time she realized I was there, the cold tip of a training blade was pressed against her jugular. Don't move. It wasn't my old voice. It was the emotionless, absolute voice of a pure predator. All the strength drained out of Voss's body. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor. All her pride and confidence were shattered into dust. I looked down at the trembling Voss with a blank face, then slowly leaned in, whispering into her ear the way she once had with me. "This is the real thing you wanted to see." The whisper was a declaration of war from the abyss, freezing Voss's soul forever. It was the cruel chime announcing the end of my revenge. My triumphant return in the special skills competition wasn't just an upset. It was the start of a fundamental shift in the power dynamics of this closed world. The monster I had become had utterly crushed Sergeant Major Voss and silenced all my tormentors with awe and fear. But one man watched this dramatic turnaround with the deepest displeasure: General Marcus Blackwood. Sinking deep into his leather chair, Blackwood glared at the competition results as if they were a personal affront. His plan had been perfectly derailed. He'd intended to quietly bury me as a broken liability, but now I was becoming the unit's new hero, an unstoppable force with undeniable skill and charisma. This was an intolerable situation for Blackwood. My existence was a constant reminder of the truth he had tried to suppress. And behind me lurked the shadow of my principled, unyielding brother, Captain Liam Hayes. Hayes, both of them. These goddamn siblings are going to ruin my perfect career, Blackwood seethed. He felt a genuine threat. The Hayes siblings were a danger to the rigid order he had built. He decided they had to be eliminated before they grew any stronger. He summoned the despairing Sergeant Major Voss. Her shattered pride made her the perfect, easily manipulated pawn. But his target was no longer me. "It's useless to hit the girl directly now. She has that troublesome armor of pure skill," Blackwood hissed at Voss. "If you want to kill the snake, you crush the head." The head of the snake was, of course, Captain Liam Hayes. No matter how strong my resolve, my greatest weakness remained my only sibling. If Liam was destroyed, I would lose my center and collapse. That was Blackwood's cold scenario. "Captain Hayes, what do you think is the most fatal crime for a soldier? Desertion? Treason?" "No, it's money," Blackwood said, a cruel smile forming on his lips. "The embezzlement of unit equipment. If we can build a solid case, any officer, no matter how good, will be dishonorably discharged and branded a criminal. The dirtiest crime." Blackwood used his immense power to set a massive trap. He skillfully altered records for inventory and supply, creating perfect paperwork that showed new, high-tech night vision goggles and specialized comms gear had been issued to Liam's company and then vanished without a trace. All the blame pointed directly at Captain Liam Hayes, the logistics officer. But paperwork wasn't enough. He needed a smoking gun and, more importantly, a traitor, someone close to Liam who would stab him in the back without hesitation. Blackwood's eyes settled on Major Andrew Drew Miller, Liam's West Point classmate and closest friend. Blackwood's intelligence branch discovered Miller had recently lost a huge amount of money on a failed stock market investment and was now being hounded by loan sharks. Blackwood summoned Miller to a secret meeting and offered the devil's bargain: his entire debt wiped clean, guaranteed future promotions. In return, Miller was to plant a USB drive with fake embezzlement data in Liam's office computer and provide damning false testimony at the crucial moment. Miller was tortured by the choice: his best friend of 20 years on one side, and the only thread saving his family from ruin on the other. In the final, agonizing moment, he chose to sell his soul. All the pieces were in place. Blackwood quietly flipped the switch. A few calm afternoons later, the peace was shattered. Without warning, CID agents stormed the base, their heavy boots echoing through the compound. Without even asking permission from the general, they went straight to the 3rd Company barracks. "Captain Liam Hayes, you are under emergency arrest for violating equipment regulations and embezzlement of government property." CID agents roughly grabbed the dumbfounded Liam's arms and slapped cold metal handcuffs on him. Soldiers rushed into the corridor, staring in shock at the unbelievable scene. Liam didn't resist. He instantly understood this was a massive conspiracy targeting him and me. His gaze locked onto one place: my pale, standing figure at the end of the corridor. "Taylor, don't you dare get dragged into this." Liam screamed the words in his heart. Just before they led him away, he looked at me and mouthed a phrase silently so no one else could notice: Don't trust him. I stood frozen, watching helplessly as my brother was shoved into a CID van and driven away. The light I had just barely grasped a few days ago was gone. I was now facing an enemy far larger, more wicked, and more deeply entrenched. Invisible power. Something that had been barely holding on in my heart finally broke. But the pieces didn't fall into despair. They turned into a terrifying flame of all-consuming rage. The last words my brother left, "Don't trust him." The mystery of who him was marked the start of my new, final war. Liam Hayes' arrest plunged my world back into darkness. The media immediately seized on the sensational story, leaking information about this secret life of an elite soldier known for his dedication. Public opinion instantly turned against Liam, and their condemnation didn't spare me, the criminal's sister. The soldiers who had just hailed me as a hero now looked at me with cold contempt and suspicion. I was an isolated fortress again, but my spirit was unbreakable. Grief and despair were burned away by the fire of my rage, leaving behind only the icy calm needed for analysis and the pure obsession required to complete my goal. I went to work trying to decipher my brother's last message, but I was just a second lieutenant against a massive, high-level conspiracy. I was powerless. Who could I trust? Where could I even start? In desperation, I turned to the only man who had transformed me into a monster, Sergeant Major Ghost. Late that night, avoiding prying eyes, I told Ghost everything in his Spartan office. He listened, silently blowing cigarette smoke at the ceiling. When I finished, he brutally crushed the cigarette in the ashtray and growled, "Blackwood's doing. He eliminates anything that threatens the fortress he built. This wasn't a hit on the captain. It's a two-stage trap to crush you." Ghost's eyes accurately saw the core of the conspiracy. "Sergeant Major, what can I do?" I asked. "We have zero chance of winning this battle through official channels. They control the referees and the rulebook. Then we fight outside their rulebook." Ghost, an old veteran who knew the light and the darkness of the military, began to lay out a plan. He activated his underground network of former trainees and old war buddies across every base in the country and started digging into General Blackwood's past. Days later, fragments of rumors and information started to piece together. Blackwood's shady dealings with a specific defense contractor, how he had used similar tactics in the past to sideline officers who crossed him, and how he used one particular aide for much of his dirty work. When I heard the name of that aide, my breath hitched. Major Andrew Miller, my brother's closest friend. No way. Major Miller was like family to Liam. He was like an uncle to me when I was a kid. I desperately shook my head, but Ghost's expression was rock hard and cold. "The most dangerous bullet in a firefight ain't from the enemy. It's from the back of the guy you trust. Human greed and fear, kid. They can shred friendship like paper. We have to talk to him first. He might be the only chance we have to flip the whole board." I took Ghost's advice and arranged a meeting with Miller at a base coffee shop. When he showed up, he was a ghost of the cheerful, confident man I remembered. He was gaunt from stress and guilt, with deep shadows under his eyes. "Major Miller," I began. He flinched and refused to meet my eyes, staring only at the coffee cup on the table. "You know everything about Liam's situation, don't you? And I know you set it up." I went straight for the jugular with icy precision. Miller's body stiffened. He mumbled, his voice thin, "I don't know what you're talking about." "You planted the evidence in his computer, didn't you?" I cut him off, my voice laced not only with anger, but with a faint, final hope that the man I knew as an older brother would somehow redeem himself. "Please, tell the truth now. Your silence is killing him. How can you sleep at night after destroying the honor of a soldier who devoted his life to this country and loved his men?" My plea shook Miller's eyes. Conscience and fear waged a final war in his soul. Finally, he clutched his head. "I didn't want to. Blackwood. General Blackwood threatened my family." But his fear of Blackwood was stronger than his conscience. He didn't have the courage to confess everything. Instead, with a trembling hand, he scribbled something on a paper napkin and slid it across the table. It was a few meaningless words. Pen. "Founders Day, 1954. I'm sorry. I can't say anything else. Don't look for me. This is all I can do." Miller stood up, almost knocking over his chair, and fled the coffee shop. I clutched the cryptic note and rushed to Ghost. We put our heads together, trying to decipher the code. "Founders Day, was clearly the unit's anniversary. 1954 must be a year. But what was the pen? Ghost rubbed his jaw, deep in thought. Then, a long-forgotten memory flashed in his mind. He slapped his knee. The general's office. Every year on Founders' Day, Blackwood always shows off an antique fountain pen. Says it was a gift from the first unit commander. It's displayed on a stand on his safe. The pen, the stand, or the safe itself. And 1954 might be the safe combination. All the pieces pointed to one place, General Blackwood's main office. All the evidence of his corruption was sleeping inside his most secure safe. But the office was in the heavily guarded command building, secured 24/7 by the CID and military police. I have to go. My eyes burned with resolve. I'll break in alone and get that evidence with my own hands. It wasn't a request, it was an absolute statement. I had decided to risk my entire career, my very life, on this final, desperate mission. The Special Operations Group Founders' Day celebration was the unit's biggest annual party. Lights glittered on the parade ground, and the military band's music soared into the night sky. General Blackwood and the senior command staff clinked champagne glasses with politicians and businessmen, trading fake smiles and speaking of the military's glory. But where the light is brightest, the shadow is deepest. Far from the festive glow, I was crouched in the dark shadow of the command building, silent as a black widow spider. I wore a skin-tight, black specialized infiltration suit, with my face covered in non-reflective camouflage paint. Attached to my belt were all the tools of the trade: wire cutters, lock-picking tools, and an ultra-thin fiber-optic camera. From the tiny bone conduction headset in my ear, I heard the suppressed voice of Ghost, who was positioned at a distant observation point. 30 seconds. I'm going to short out the power in the headquarters wing. You have 20 seconds max before the backup generator and cameras come on. Climb to the general's third-floor window. Can you make it? No problem, I replied curtly, looking up at the sheer wall. For a normal person, it would be vertigo-inducing. But to me, honed by hell, the slight ledges and drainpipes looked like a three-dimensional map for my ascent. With a sudden, muffled thunk, the lights and cameras went out, just as promised. Total darkness. My body lunged toward the wall as if freed from gravity. My hands and feet, moving with flawless precision, found and gripped every hold. My muscles screamed, and my heart hammered, but my focus was only on the third-floor window. Just as the backup power surged on, my fingertips grabbed the windowsill. Phase 1 complete. Get inside. Using a glass cutter with a special suction cup, I silently cut a section of the window and slipped inside like a ghost. The silent, dark office, lit only by the moonlight, felt like the eerie lair of a giant, sleeping beast. I put on my night vision goggles and quickly scanned the room. The heavy desk, the expensive sofa, the unit banner on the wall, and the large safe beneath it, casting a dull sheen. The target. Target confirmed. Reaching the safe. Entering code 1954. I crept up to the safe and, with trembling fingers, typed the numbers into the keypad. A soft electronic beep signaled the lock opening. But the heavy steel door didn't budge. Instead, a second authentication system, a red laser beam, appeared below the keypad. Fingerprint scan. Damn it. Miller didn't know about the biometric lock. Ghost's frustrated voice whispered in my ear. Is this the end? Then, the second keyword from Miller's note flashed in my mind. Pen. I reached up to the antique fountain pen case displayed on top of the safe. Inside the case, along with the pen, was a small, neatly folded chamois cloth, likely used for polishing.